welcome back to our discussion on the change management processes. We were discussing the different processes of introducing and managing change. In the last discussion, just introduced the concept of action research model, and in today's session, we are going to look into the action research model in much details. So, let us begin. So, as we see, management research is a systematic inquiry that helps to solve the business problems and contribute to management knowledge. So, it is the application of information which has been gathered and analyzed to the resolution of a given problems or queries or questions at hand. So, it contributes directly or indirectly to the decision making process in an organization. It also helps in building a body of knowledge which codifies and articulates the problem and solution set concerned with understanding and improving the practice of management. So, this is generally what we mean by management research, which are again of different types, like fundamental research, which helps to generate a body of knowledge by treating to comprehend how certain problems occur in organizations can be solved. It can be a descriptive research, which includes surveys and fact finding inquiries to different kinds to describe the state of affairs as it exists at present. It can be a quantitative research, like which is applicable to phenomena that are measurable, so that it can be expressed in terms of quantity. It can be a conceptual research, like it is related to some abstract ideas or theory. It is generally used by philosophers and thinkers to develop new concepts or to interpret existing ones. It can be an exploratory research also, which is an examination into the subject in an attempt to gain further insight for a particular problem that has not been clearly defined. And again, it can be an action research also. So, action research helps to solve a current problem faced by the manager in the work setting, demanding a timely solution. Here, in today's discussion, we are going to elaborate further on action research. So, it is a strategy for generating and acquiring knowledge that managers can use to define an organization's desired future state. So, it helps in to design a change program that allows organization to reach that desired future state. So, as we told, like action research may be defined as an emergent inquiry process, which generally we talk of appreciative inquiry technique, in which applied behavioral science knowledge is integrated with the existing organizational knowledge, and it addresses real organizational issues. So, it is very important method for facilitating organizational change, and it leads to like problem diagnosis, problem identification, experiential learning, and problem solving process. And each of these stages, the client is included, and we get to know that client's perspective and what the client wants, what are the viewpoints of um, the change initiators, what are the viewpoints of the people who will be affected by change, and we try to address all these issues. So, the characteristics of action research include a foundation of research, direct participation in some form by the co-researchers in the cycles of action, the reflection, learning, and planning. So, organizational action research involves like the cross functional teams who address deep rooted organizational issues through recurring cycles of actions and reflections. So, it is generally an umbrella term which is used for a host of activities to which is intended to foster change on the group, organization, and at the societal level. So, action research generally you can understand from the term action, then a certain problem is identified, certain actions are taken to understand that problem and to identify the issues and find answer to the questions, implement it, see how it is working and what are the feedback on it, see whether it is like achieving the target, like at the outcome, desired outcome. If not, what is happening, and again decide on the next set of actions. And for this, like the researcher or the change initiator, or the change champion has to be embedded into the whole system, and by introducing the action they need to observe how it is working, what is the feedback coming, what is the outcome, and what is the gap in, like, from the desired outcome to the actual one, and how to bridge that gap through a next set of actions. So the steps in action research can be like diagnosing the organizations, then determining the desired future state, implementing the actions, evaluating the action, and institutionalizing the action research, which will again give back to the feedback loop to diagnosing the organizations. So, when we talk of diagnosing the organization, it talks of recognizing the problems and the need to solve the problems. Then, number two is, of course, like determining the desired future state. And third is the implementing action, in which it is a three-step process. Like the managers need to identify possible impediments to change, like what could be the like barriers to the change process, deciding like who will be actually responsible for the changes and controlling the change processes. Sometimes external change agents who are outside consultants who are experts in managing the change. Sometimes the change agent could be internal change agents also, like managers from within the organization who are knowledgeable about the situation to be changed. Number C point is deciding which specific change strategy will be most effectively unfreeze, change, and refreeze the organization. So it is very important, like based on the nature of the change, we are going to see like which is the most appropriate technique to be used to bring in the like uh, generate the awareness, like change is required, which is the unfreezing state, then moving people to the transition stage, and ultimately accepting the change, and again stabilizing the new processes in the organization, which we call of refreezing the organization. So top down change is a change that is implemented by the managers at the higher level in the organization, and the bottom of change is a change that is implemented by the employees at the lower level in the organization and gradually rises until it is felt throughout the organization. So you have to decide like whether to bring in a top down change or a bottom up change. Next step is evaluating the action. So as we told, like it is a we understand the problem, we diagnose the problem, identify the uh, where are the like nodes of the problem, then we take an action to address each of these nodes, and then we implement it, and then of course an evaluation of the action needs to be done, so which needs to assess the degree to which the changes have been accomplished in the for the desired objectives. Institutionalizing the action research is members at all levels must be rewarded for their efforts. So anybody who takes a positive step to like implement the change process or like accept the change, so it needs to be rewarded, it needs to be recognized. So and in that way the change process gets initiated, and the action research gets institutionalized in the organization. Now, what are the advantages of action research is like we can think of many of those advantages. First is like action research approach to problem resolution and dealing with the challenges of the business. It's very unique way, like in how you address the problem. It improves the organization's preparedness in proactively responding to the change by anticipating the change in advance and developing the internal mechanism. Because you are studying the external environment, because you are diagnosing the organizations and its problems, so you are getting prepared for the upcoming change. You get to know like what are your strength points and what are your weaknesses, and how to address to the situations in the external world as an opportunity for you or a threat for you, based on the skills that you have, and how to keep yourself prepared for the upcoming opportunities or threats as you may interpret it. So it is a very systematic and methodical process which helps the OD professionals in planning and implementing the interventions directed towards like improving the organization's competitiveness in the business situation. So it takes, third is like it takes the all the problem in a very holistic manner, and it ensures like the problems are addressed proactively with effective solutions. Action research also helps in analysis of the issues at hand and developing the interventions. So like it focuses on like converting the information into action. As we understand, it is not enough to know like a change is required, but more important for is like how to address the process of change through certain actions. So action research focuses on converting the information into action. So it is helpful in the identification of the requirements of the client and the existing and the potential challenges, the development of a contract which involves the um, definition of the key deliverables and the working relationship, then data collection and identifications of the gaps or the root causes of the issues, then analysis of the data for setting the priorities and the plans of action, deciding on the appropriate interventions techniques, and developing a plan for implementing the intervention for achieving the intended objectives. So you can see like it is a very systematic steps of actions to be taken for addressing each of the levels, and for like involving understanding the challenges involving the client, and then what will be the relationship between the client and the change, like a change agent, then what are the deliverables which are there. So how to do a root cause analysis, and how to identify the gaps, what are the yardsticks of measuring the performances, and if certain gaps are identified, what will be the next process of actions, and what will be your interventions, what are your implementation techniques. All these needs to be like brainstormed and decided very carefully before actually we like delve into the real life situations of implementing the action. So it requires a lot of background work, a lot of like brainstorming, which to come to look at the lot of focus group discussions with the clients to understand their viewpoint, a pilot survey with the a group of people who will be like the on maybe those who are going to face the change situations. So to identify the problem, and to identify the uh, maybe the pain points, and then find out what will be the appropriate actions for it, and how to like introduce it into the organization. So and it helps also in the implementation of the successful change programs on a short term as well as a long term basis. So in a nutshell we can tell like it a lot of thought process goes on, goes into rather when you're talking of the action research. facilitates a learning culture. Is like the data collected in the entire process can be used in diverse areas, such as the implementation of quality tools for continuous improvement. It can be used for strategic planning, change management, decision making, and problem solving, and communication process, organizational restructuring, leadership development, and implementation of process improvement initiatives. So it fosters a deeper understanding related to the organizational functioning and the challenges. It provides the best alternatives or strategic solutions for handling a problem at hand, or at various organizational issues. Because when people go into the action research, before taking in a particular action for solving a problem in a particular area, we really have to take into cognizance the what will be the effect of those actions on the other interrelated subsystems, and how it is going to affect them, and what handholding support is required for the other affected and the related stakeholders, so that it creates a new equilibrium. So in that cases, it is a very holistic approach, and it leads to a deeper understanding of the organizational functioning and challenges. The key involvement of the senior leaders and the various stakeholders are very important part of the action research process. So the change agents act here as the champions of change. They provide feedback and are involved in extensive communication with the key stakeholders across the various levels. The it improves and facilitates collaboration, including the change agent collaborates with the client in the process of identification of the problems, and develops effective plans offering realistic solutions. It helps in fostering like mutual trust and interdependence, which are very essential in the pursuit of an organizational success. It helps in rebuilding the organizational culture, and involves the confidence, as well as the of people, as well as in the people, for the entire process of organizational change. So it is like helps in rebuilding the culture through the process of confidence, and people have a maybe the new look at the people and their possibilities and their competences, and it introduces a new process of organizational change. So it results in performance improvement in all areas. So as we are discussing, as action research model is a very comprehensive technique. It takes a comprehensive approach to identifying the areas of improvement in all areas that affect organizational functioning and success in the long run. So it helps in like achieving the strategic goals of an organization by facilitating an alignment between the strategic objectives and the goals of the action research interventions. As we are discussing, it is a very integrated performance management system. Look at the integrated performance management system, because we understand organization is a bigger system of other subsystems which are very interlinked with each other, and then a comprehensive approach needs to be taken, so that like one department is not or one department or one division is not flourishing at the cost of the other, or like the or like one improvement is not happening at the cost of the or decreased performance of in other areas. So this needs to be kept in mind, like before we are recommending any actions for improvement, like what is the effect on the other related subsystems. The process of action research also helps in the leadership development by developing their facilitation skills, developing their team building and team management skills, and understanding the issues of the team members. So it views the organization It views the organization from a holistic perspective instead of paying importance to the individual subsystem of the organization in parts. So, when we talk of the application of action research model, so we see like the action research is used as a means of implementing organizational change, especially in a complex social situations where people whose lives or circumstances are being changed need to be involved in the designing and implementing the change that affects them. So, this idea of action research, as it was conceptualized by Carl Lewin, so you can see like it has a lot of similarity with the force field analysis model that he had suggested. He suggested that efforts to bring about planned change in an organization should approach change as a multi stage process. The model of planned change is made up of three steps. His description of the process of change involves three steps, which are unfreezing, reducing the force for status quo, moving, developing new attitudes and values and behaviors, and refreezing, which is establishing the new status quo. So it is not like we are disturbing how people are thinking at present, but then again you have to move them to a stage where they're developing new attitudes and values and behaviors, and after that the new process needs to be stabilized also. People have to accept it, implement it, and have to function under it so that we can get feedback about how the new ways are functioning. So unfreeze, move, and refreeze, these are the three steps involved in the like plan change introduction process. So there are like uh, you'll find in an organization there are always two kinds of people, maybe people who are pushing for change and the people who are desirous of status quo. So we have to like um, increase the push for change force more, so that the people unfreeze from the state of status quo to a moving state. So these two groups may be equal in force. The force field theory shows how the forces for and against change and how organization is balanced anytime between the two forces. This we have already discussed in the last lecture when we were discussing the change management processes. So mm, the applications of the applications of action research model is that it is traditionally aimed at both helping a specific organization implement a planned change and at developing more general knowledge that can be applied to other settings. It emphasizes heavily the data gathering and diagnosis prior to action planning and implementation, as well as careful evaluation of results after the action is taken. So that is what we were discussing. It requires a lot of thought process, it requires a lot of background research before we go on implementing and the action, and deciding rather what action to take in what kind of situation. So, the action research model involves 8 steps for planned change management, such as the problem identification, consultation with expert, data gathering, and preliminary diagnosis, then feedback to the client, joint diagnosis, joint action plan, action, and post action data gathering. So we'll be discussing this something in details. Like in problem identification, this stage usually begins when an executive senses that the organization has one or more problems that might be solved with the help of an OD practitioner. Consultation with the expert. During the initial contact, the OD practitioner and the client carefully assess each other's viewpoints. Data gathering and preliminary diagnosis. This step is usually completed by the OD practitioner, often in conjunction with the organization members. It involves gathering appropriate information and analyzing it to determine the underlying causes of organizational problems. Feedback to the client. Because action research is a collaborative activity, the diagnostic data are fed back to the client, usually in a group or work team meeting. Feedback helps the experts determine the strengths and weaknesses of the organization or unit under study. Joint diagnosis of the problem. This is a very important step. At this point, members discuss the feedback and explore with the experts whether they want to work on the identified problems. Joint action planning. Next, the expert and the client members jointly agree on the further actions to be taken. At this stage, the specific action to be taken depends on the culture, technology, and environment of the organization, the diagnosis of the problem, and the time and the cost of the intervention. So, you can understand there could be n number of ways to solve a particular problem, but based on the other situational variables or the constraints which are there, they jointly come to the client and the OD practitioner jointly come to a conclusion about which problem to be answered and what sets of actions to be taken for it. Action at this stage involves the actual change from an organizational state to another. So, it may include installing new methods and procedures, reorganizing the structures and work designs, and reinforcing new behaviors. Post action data gathering. Action research is a cyclical process, so that data should also be gathered after the action has been taken to measure and determine the effects of the action and to feed the results back to the organization. So, this in turn may result in the re-diagnosis and new actions. So, post data gathering, when you are analyzing it, you may find like newer potential areas of problems, and then this when this data are given back to the organization, it may require another new set of actions, and you have to go on doing it. So you can see like this is a very, it goes on in a cyclical way. You will diagnose a problem, you decide on the which problem to be like addressed to, what are the actions to be followed, and then you like implement the actual actions. After that, you take in the data, gather the data and analyze it, come to conclusions, give your recommendations, and that recommendations in order to be implemented require a new set of actions, which again may have certain like feedback from the organization, and then again a new set of action research is required. So this is a very cyclical process as we may think of. Now, what are some of the limitations of the action research model? Also, we need to understand like it is not good in all situations, and there are certain disadvantages to this approach also, like uh, because there is some lack of knowledge regarding what is action research. Some people are in confusion, some and like people do not know the basic, sometimes the basic steps of action research. So therefore the managers may be like may see it with certain skepticism. So they do not want to share data sometimes, so they do not get to understand like what is the objectivity of this. So different this lack of knowledge may give rise to certain perceptual barriers, and getting cooperation from people for doing the action research, people from within the organization for doing the action research sometimes is very like troublesome to get this cooperation from the people. It is too close to consulting. So like it is sometimes it is look alike with like a consulting business, which is which sometimes people get confused like what is an action research and what is the consulting. So we need to understand like action research is a research process that we follow to understand the problem, then to see how our suggestions are working, what are the like effects of that change process initiated, what are the handholding support required. So it is a well systematic process based on scientific methodology, rather than making some assumptions about yes, this is going to work and that is not going to work. It is time consuming. Participating in meetings and being a part of a change process takes time, and it requires to find a good balance between this and the writing and the analysis of the data. So, lack of knowledge, then confusing it with consulting, then time consuming as some of the disadvantages of the like action research process. Then also subjectivity. So, uh, sometimes when left unchecked, the results could be laden with subjectivity. So sometimes the researcher gets like over involved in the extent, like some personal biases may come into the play when we are analyzing the data. So we have to be within the system, we have to do the research but still maintain a degree of separatedness from the system, so that as an independent observer we can have a view of the whole system and come to our recommendations and conclusions about it. So that requires a skill on the part of the OD practitioner, as a part of doing action research, to get embedded into the system, to understand it, from the client's perspective and the like people's perspective on which the change is to be implemented. But still, after knowing these two perspectives, separate oneself out from the situation as an independent observer, look at it from a distance, and then give the recommendations based on the data collected and the observations made. So that is very important to maintain the objectivity of the recommendations given. Vulnerability to pressure. Another risk factor in doing action research is that the researchers are often subordinates in an organizational setting. So, when the researcher is an insider in an organization, there could be power relations, and the differences may complicate the conduct. Then, researchers might be in a pressure or like coerced to alter the findings to suit organizational objectives. So that is a case of like when you talk of internal change agents and how they are vulnerable to particular pressure situations. So another is the difficulties in question framing. So the cyclical research process in action research is aimed at understanding and then taking actions. So the initial research question and sometimes generally not that smooth, we can take it to be rough, and it may be refined thereafter depending on the initial findings. So the people may find difficulties in putting the questions, how to put the questions and what will be the wordings of the questions, like what are the proper markers for certain actions to be done, or things for certain behaviors to be studied. So these requires a lot of skill and acumen of the research acumen of the person who is going to do this, introduce this change process and practice this action research. Lot of expertise on the part of the OD practitioner, so that proper questions are framed, which when answered is going to bring out the real problems as there in the situations. So these are some of the references that we have referred to. So as a part of this lecture session, we can summarize like we have focused on the different aspects of management research, types of action research, application of action research model, and limitation of this model, which will enhance the learners or encourage the learners to learn all about and build up their knowledge about the different aspects of the action research model as we apply different situations of organizational change. And they are going to keep these techniques in mind, like when they are in the field of their management practice. So, in the next discussion, we are going to focus on organizational development model to manage organizational change, concepts, issues, and techniques. Till then, thank you. Meet you with the next discussion on organizational development and the change processes. Thank you.